Hello, everyone. It's 7 o'clock. I am Gwen Alyce Clayton, your awesome host for the evening. Welcome to Krampusnacht and book launch. We're here tonight to celebrate the launch of my latest book, Zinfandel's Grimoire. And I'm still learning how to use this webcam thing. It's driving me nuts. So anyhow, this was just released November 3rd. You can get it on Amazon. I wanted to wait until tonight because it's Krampusnacht. So for those of you who don't know what Krampusnacht is, let me tell you a little bit about it. Krampus is a character from Bavarian and Austrian folklore. He is known as the Christmas devil or the Christmas demon, but in my book, he's a minor character, and I don't have anything like what he is in contemporary folklore. But let me read a little bit I'm going to read a little bit from the Krampus, the Old Dark Christmas, by Al Ridenour. I wonder if he's related to Lee Ritenour. Probably not, the musician. Okay, so beginning in the early 2000s, many English-speaking web users began stumbling upon strangely arresting pictures said to have something to do with an odd European Christmas custom. Mostly these were scans of pre-World War I postcards featuring what appeared to be a bishop accompanied by a chained furry devil. The creature went by the name Krampus, and this peculiar word appeared in the German phrase Ruf von Krampus. Erica, do you speak German? I thought you said you spoke German and French, so you can correct my German if I'm wrong. Greetings from Krampus is what I was trying to say. Emblazoned on the cards. Then there were the children, shackled and tethered on chains, caught in a basket carried on the creature's back, or menaced by switches, clutched in that devilish claw. It was the kids that threw us. If this was something to do with Christmas, it was light years from the cloying celebration of childhood wonder marketed today. These jarring images were increasingly forwarded and reposted, studied with morbid curiosity, and eventually, in some quarters, gleefully embraced as a sort of countercultural holiday meme. Many of these images were channeled into pop consciousness by Chicago author and art curator Monty Beauchamp, who in 2004 published the first several graphic compilations of Krampuskarten. So that's a little bit of, that really isn't what I wanted to talk about. Anyhow, Krampus is like, he's a goat character, like a satyr. We see that a lot in folklore. It's nothing uncommon. And of course, everybody has to make up their own renditions, and it gets changed by each generation. There were some pre-Christian folklore characters from Bavaria and Austria and the whole Alpine region. And it started with the Frau Perkta, who's actually a woman. She was like a witch character. And so she was actually like, some people call her Krampus's mom, but anyhow, she's someone that I probably wouldn't get along with because she would come around and swat women with the switch if they didn't have their houses clean. And I don't keep a very clean house. I try, I really do. So anyhow, Krampusnacht is a time when on December 5th every year, it's the day before St. Nicholas Day. So if you are Catholic or Orthodox and maybe some other what do you call them? I'm drawing a blank on the word. What do you call it? The parts of if you belong to certain Christian churches, you'll know that December 6th is St. Nicholas Day, and St. Nicholas is the patron saint of children. He's also the patron saint of travelers and the patron saint of a whole bunch of other things. But anyhow, his feast day is December 6th. Now, with the old Catholic Church, your feast day was the day that you entered heaven. So in other words, that's the day that you died. So when I wrote my Krampus character, I started with December 6th, which we know is the day that St. Nicholas died. And we know that he died in the year 343 AD, or well, we call it Common Era now. So he is from denominations. Thank you, Joe. So yes, so we know that that St. Nicholas was a bishop living in what is now Turkey, and he died in December 6th in the year 343 CE. So Krampus, somehow they got and I do this a lot. I start spacing out. I do have some brain fog caused by the chemotherapy from a couple of years ago. I'm a breast cancer survivor, for those of you who don't know me very well. So St. Nicholas died December 6th, and Krampus Krampusnacht was the night before St. Nicholas Day. So St. Nicholas would come in the middle of the night, and he would fill children's shoes with gold coins. So they would wake up just the morning of December 6th with gold coins in their shoes. So Krampus, and I'm not really sure how this started, so I just made it up. Krampusnacht was December 5th. And I'm like, well, how on earth did Krampus get affiliated with St. Nicholas? That didn't make any sense to me at all. So I made it up. I totally made it up. So this is my version of Krampusnacht. So Krampus, the real Krampus, was the real Krampus, as I'm making it up, okay, right? So, hi Candace, how are you? Yeah, I'm reading everybody's comments too. So anyhow, so Krampus, according to Gwen Alyce Clayton, was a teenage boy who lived in the high mountains of Austria. And in Austria, they have ibex goats. Well, that sounds kind of redundant. Ibex goat. They have a type of goat called an ibex. Now, a lot of times when you see the Baphomet character and you see those horns that Baphomet has, those are ibex goats. And so I made my Krampus character a teenage boy who was a goat herder, and he herded these ibex goats. Yeah, Erica says, the way I learned it, Krampus accompanied the Christ child and beat the bad kids while the Christ child rewarded the good ones. I have not heard that. Interesting, Erica. Thank you for sharing that. So Krampus was, so he would have died young. He would have been, I'm looking at all the different things that, all the different physical characteristics that people say about Krampus. Like he had one cloven hoof and one long foot. So I'm like, now what would give you a cloven foot and a long foot? One cloven foot, one long foot. And there's, and then he was covered in hair and he had horns. And then of course he got his names because Krampen is the word for claw. So he had claw-like hands. So I had this flashback of when I worked for the Disabled Student Services Center at American River College in Sacramento. And a friend of mine named Roy, he was so sweet. Oh my God, heart of gold. I just love this guy. He had cerebral palsy and he had the cramped hands and and a long tongue. So Krampus supposedly has a long tongue. So I'm like, now what would give you a long tongue, cramped hands, and then some uneven footing? And I'm like, oh my God, Krampus has cerebral palsy. And then what other physical characteristic would give you hair all over your body? And I just forgot. I totally forgot the name of the syndrome that they have, but there's the werewolf syndrome where people have Dark side. Oh, hi, Dennis. Thank you for joining us tonight. So he had hair all over him, and then you can't have horns on your head. They are these keratinous. Did I say that right? Is that the right word? Keratinous growths that spur. You can get them anywhere on your body, but you can't have them. So I'm like, oh my God, he would have been. So he would have had all of these different afflictions. So he probably wouldn't have lived very long. So he probably would have died at a young age. And no, I'm blanking. I'm totally blanking, and I'm doing this. Okay. So anyhow, I'm going to keep going with it. So he would have died at a young age, and he's also very lascivious. So, like, so he probably was a teenage goat boy with cerebral palsy, with that hair, the werewolf syndrome, and the tumors on his head. And he would have been. So what would life have been like for Krampus? He would have been like horribly teased, just in a very cruel way. Because I know I got teased a lot when I was a teenager. And he was just horribly cruel. So by the time he died, he would have had a lot of anger in his heart. So here is Krampus, a teenage boy who obviously, if he's going to be paired with St. Nicholas, then he has to have died the same night. So let's say that Krampus died the night of December 5th, and St. Nicholas died the night that same night, but like early in the morning, like after midnight. So technically, Nicholas died December 6th, but Krampus died December 5th because he died before midnight. So that is my story of Krampus and St. Nicholas. And we'll get into that a little bit later. Now I want to talk about my book. So this is, hold on one second. I can see my husband's trying to message me. Oh, okay. Never mind. So this is my book, Zinfandel's Grimoire. It is the second book of the Rivervine trilogy. The first book is from Modest Sellers. And I just recently re-released this. I originally released for Modest Sellers in 2016. I was planning on doing the sequel the next year, but life happened and it didn't happen, and I never got it published. So I redid this. I had someone beta read this and caught a whole bunch of errors. So I've redone this a little bit, and I got a new cover. And I really want to give a big shout out to Christine Logan of Christine Logan Photography. She did the cover, and she also did my author photo, which you can't see there. And then there's the inside photo. She did all the photography. She also did the photography for the cover of Zinfandel's Grimoire. And she did a beautiful job. The photography was done at Country Heritage Winery up in Leato, Indiana. It's a really nice winery. And that's not the wine I'm drinking tonight. Tonight I do have a Zinfandel. I am drinking a 2016 Ghost Pine Zinfandel. Appropriate. 2016 was the year my first book came out. And Ghost Pines, get it? I had to be kind of clever, ever so clever. So cheers. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening. We've got a great evening in store for you. I also made some apple strudel in honor of Krampus. I have another chapter where Krampus teaches the students how to make apple strudel. So that's kind of interesting. So drop me a comment in the comments section. If you like to drink wine, what is your favorite kind of wine to drink? And do you like apple strudel? And if you do like apple strudel, do you like it tart or do you like it cinnamony? Or do you prefer it with caramel? And you know what? I could probably make it with peanut butter. I've never tried that before. I personally love caramel apple. My husband likes it tart. Neither one of us like a whole lot of cinnamon, so I don't put cinnamon in it. I make mine my secret ingredient. So I slice up all of the apples, and then I soak them in lemon juice, and then I add apricot preserves. So anyhow, that's my little trick to apple strudel. Now, getting back to Zinfandel's Grimoire. This is book 2 of the Rivervine trilogy. Rivervine is a fictional city. I made up the name. It is based on the Sierra foothills region of Northern California, primarily Amador County. I lived in Amador County for 12 years and I loved it. It's a beautiful, beautiful area, beautiful part of the country. And it has a fabulous wine region. And they're especially known for their Zinfandels, Syrahs, and Barberas, and some others. Wine. Eric is saying wine. I'm a fan of a good rosé. Apple strudel is always a yes. Caramel is the best. Erica, you and I, we got to get together soon, honey. So Rivervine. So it's set in, you can just imagine Amador County if you've ever been there. If you haven't been there, it's a foothills community. So it's not high up in the mountains, but it's not flatland. There's some nice rolling hills. There's a couple different rivers. It's bordered on the south is the McCallamy River, and on the north is the, I'm blanking on the name of the river up north. If any of my Amador friends are online, can you tell me what's the Cosumnes? The Cosumnes River. Got it. So that's Rivervine. It's a fictional city. And the commodities. So the commodities are a group of merchants that live in the Old Town area, and they run all of the small mom and pop businesses in the Old Town area, and then there's also a lot of agricultural businesses, primarily the winery. So, so the winery is the anchor business, and the winery is on a haunted patch of land. It was Zinfandel is the name of the main ghost who haunts the winery, and she's lived several lives. So this book deals a lot with reincarnation. So I'm not going to tell you what her first and her second lives were, but her third life was as a young woman of her father was Chinese and her mother belonged to this group of people, of immigrants known as the Kamatis. And the Kamatis originally came from Romania in the 1700s or 1600s, 1692. They came over, long story. I'm not going to get into the whole thing. Anyhow, the Kamatis came here they came to the United States in the 17th century, made their way to California. I'm not going to tell you how, but I do explain it in Fermata Sellers and in this book. So, and then they bred with the Miwok and the Maidu, and then the English and the Russian settlers who came into that part of the country. And then finally, Zinfandel's father came from China. So her father was Chinese and her mother was Kamati. And they lived fairly peacefully until Captain Sutter came. And he came so the real Captain Sutter came to Sacramento, which was originally called New Helvetia, in 1839. And by 1841, he had actually come up to the area that is Amador County. So Captain Sutter has his I'm doing it again. I'm totally doing this again. So Captain Sutter has a little bit of of a history with Rivervine. So anyhow, she dies. I'm not going to tell you how she dies, but she dies. And she decides to become a ghost. And she is just going to make the land, just keep it sacred. It's going to be the black land. She calls it just everything, the whole soil is black. And I have a really cool story. There is a winery in Amador County. I think it's called Story Winery. It might be Story. I know there's definitely a winery called Story Winery, but I don't know if Story is the one that has this. They have a Zinfandel that is, they call it a fire Zin or something, because the ash content was so high, because the Miwok used to burn their land, and that was really common. So the ash content of this particular vineyard is very high, and it makes wonderful Zinfandel, really, really lovely Zinfandel. And if it's not Story Winery, I'm going to be in so much trouble with my vintner friends. So so those are the commodities. So in 1969, this couple comes from San Francisco, and they both served in the Vietnam War. Sage was I forgot what, he was a soldier. I don't remember what job he had. I'm totally blanking out. I'm doing this. It's horrible. Anyhow, so I forgot what role I gave him. But anyhow, I think I made him a sergeant. Anyhow, he was in the Army, and then Sage Zavia is his wife, and she was a nurse in Vietnam. So Vietnam ends. It's 1969, and they're just really, they don't want anything to do with the city. So they come up to Rivervine. They find this patch of land that is all black, and Zinfandel, who's been a ghost for 120 years, decides, this is the couple that I want to take care of my land. So she says, okay, you guys can have the land, and suddenly it starts to regenerate, and they turn it into a winery. So the couple's name is Sage and Zavia Divinorum. And they are the owners of Fermata Cellars Winery. So now I want to get started on, I want to prepare to bring in our first guest. I have several guests tonight, some friends of mine. I'm very proud of all of them, to talk about different subjects that are relative to the Zinfandel's Grimoire. Now, I just want to read a little passage first. So, the Krampus chapter starts off with Zinfandel telling the story of Krampus and Bishop Nicholas to this group of teenagers, and this is what she tells them. Oh, I didn't print this in big enough print. Okay. On a silvery December night let me try to do this on the book. This is going to be any better. All right. On a silvery December night in the year of their Lord 343, two men met their demise. One, a lowly young goat herder in the Alps of Austria. The other, a benevolent cleric from what is now the country of Turkey. Neither man had known the other before the time when their souls crossed the veil from the physical world into the occult realm. The bishop, dressed in a red-hooded robe, chuckled when he set eyes on his new companion. "You look just as lost as me, my friend," he said to the goat herder. The young man was unable to speak, but wagged his head furiously, a look of terror shooting from his crusty eyes. As the priest moved closer, the peasant recoiled further, raising his arms across his face to hide from the stranger. "My friend, I come in peace," begged the priest. He was hoping to gain the poor man's trust, but the skittish soul continued to shiver in a huddle. "You do not need to fear me, my friend," Nicholas assured. "Please, let me see your face so we may talk man to man." Slowly, the goat boy released his arms and stood up straight, allowing the bishop to get a good look at the full figure of the creature sharing the twain with him at that moment. In all honesty, the peasant did indeed look like a demon. He had horn-like lesions that protruded out of his mouth, and a body covered in short, coarse hairs, the color and smell of the ibex that roamed the Alps. All 10 fingers curved like eagle talons, and his left foot twisted downward and inward. Letting his guard down a bit, he took a slow and cautious step forward toward the old man. As he lifted himself up on the toes of his left foot, it appeared as if it were a hoof from one of his goats. His right foot, seeming much larger than the left, flopped when it landed. Nicholas had heard of the satyrs of ancient myths who were half goat and half man, but standing before him at this very moment was a creature who could quite possibly be the source of such legends. Yet somehow he knew this was no accident of nature, but rather a beautiful child of God. Soberly, the priest asked, "Do you have a name, my friend?" The boy mumbled something that sounded like, "My mom named me Klaus, but other children call me Krampus." And I just want to let you know, the voice that I'm using for Krampus is the voice of Roy that I was telling you about from Sacramento. And the voice of Bishop Nicholas is the voice of this musician I used to know in, hold on, musician that I knew in Sacramento who was from Turkey. So I forgot his name, but I have his voice going through my head when I'm reading the Nicholas parts. Okay, so I am Bishop Nicholas, the cleric replied. He took a moment to study the expressions on his new friend's face and then said, "I sense anger in your heart." "I hate people," Krampus yelled. "They are so cruel. They call me a devil." "Are you a devil?" Nicholas asked, certain the answer was no. "Maybe," Krampus sheepishly replied. "I look like a devil, so I must be a devil." "If you were a devil, you would surely know it. A devil has no love in his heart." "Then that is what I am. How can I have love in my heart when all I have known is cruelty? Not one person has ever shown me kindness." Nicholas looked around and wondered out loud. St. Peter was supposed to meet us here. I wonder where he is. Where are the pearly gates? Perhaps we are lost. Krampus guffawed and rolled his eyes, skeptical that such a gatekeeper existed. Surely, he thought to himself, there is no God, no St. Peter, and no heaven. No human has ever been virtuous enough to deserve such an eternal award. They are all cruel. Bishop Nicholas read Krampus's mind. "Let us form a partnership, you and I," Nicholas proposed. "Let us ride the skies across the world on the anniversary of this night every year. If I find children who have shown mercy and compassion, I shall reward them. If you find children who have been cruel and malicious, you can punish them." He reached out his right arm to shake the goat herder's hand, making a gentleman's agreement. Krampus lengthened his claw, and the two men shook on the deal. For 1,659 years, the battle has been fought on the evening between the 5th and 6th of December, a night they call Krampusnacht. Krampus punishes naughty children by swatting them with willow switches and filling their stockings with coal. Meanwhile, Sinterklaas, also known as Santa Claus, Kris Kringle, and Saint Nick, rewards nice boys and girls with sweet treats and toys. So now I would like to bring in our first guest, Sharon Kuhn. Hi, Sharon.
Hey there, it's wonderful.
Hi, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Sharon is a good friend of mine, and she is the author of Empathy, show us your book. Empathy, a Guide to Maximizing Human Potential. That just came out. When did it come out?
Came out in September.
And I did have the privilege of reading an advanced copy of it. And I think it is fascinating. I think the information contained in her book is something that everyone should read. And Sharon is also the founder of the Center for Empathy, and she is an emotional intelligence coach. So Sharon, tell me a little bit about you and what you do.
Thank you, Gwen, and I'm loving your evening tonight. At the Center for Empathy, we look at the biology of how giving affirmation and understanding other states of mind and having compassion changes our very person. It changes our soul. It changes our brain. It changes how we see the world, and it mainly changes how we see ourselves. And Gwen, one of the things I just love about your story here and the way you live your life is you care about in this myth or in the history around the myths that have been passed down through the generations. What were the human beings experiencing? What were they suffering from? What were they not understanding about each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why would one person sort of be the giver of love? Sort of Nicholas is like giving all the good. He's got all the goodness. And then this little boy or this goat herder, this teenager, kind of has all the badness. And
Mm-hmm.
so why would that be? And in my work at the Center for Empathy, we not only focus on the science of empathy, but how to give it so that we're all feeling the love and inclusion that your story actually plays out. So I thought you were going to read the whole chapter, but you're not going to read the whole chapter.
I was originally going to do the whole chapter.
Mhm.
That as I was rehearsing it, it was 35 minutes long. I'm like, I'm not reading 35 minutes worth. I'm just gonna read the little part and then I'm gonna ad lib the rest because it was just a lot to digest.
Okay.
So
Okay.
talk to me about if talk to me about Krampus. What is your assessment of Krampus?
Yeah. So to me, for me, I look at everything through the lens of bonding and connection. And so often in families today in 2020 going into 2021, we might love our little child, but if our little child is different than we are, we may not know how to give that child what they need in a way where they can receive a beautiful identity or a reflection or a mirroring of their identity. And for a child that has severe issues like cerebral palsy, or today we've got a lot of autism, today we've got a lot of issues, but what my favorite scientists like Dr. Alan Shore, UCLA, and many of the neuroscientists, they're showing us that almost all pathology or mental duress that is an ongoing issue for us stems from feeling insecurely attached as a child, or the attachment was interrupted. So all that to say that you started the evening out tonight referring to stories before World War I, the postcards and things that we saw of Krampus, evil, dark, bad. We know that when generations have been exposed to warring and famines and how hard life is, that they don't grow the parts of their brain as well for relating as they do for fighting and surviving.
Hmm.
And what that shows us with children like Krampus, and it can be true for us here in the United States, even though we've been in a peaceful world for a long time, as far as on our land. We know now that parents can be so stressed out in a different kind of war. And I don't mean the pandemic right now. I mean the stress of trying to live in an industrial world. So some of our kids are cutting, committing suicide. They don't have a good image of themselves. And we're saying they live in a loving home. Like, what is wrong with my kid? I get a lot of that Center for Empathy. Center for Empathy, I have the individual track where I help people understand themselves and their loved ones. And then the business track where we say, how do we create workplace wellness, right? Well, in the family track, we see a lot of kids who might be acting out bizarre things. And really, they're no more bizarre than a child like Krampus, that if they have perceived, keyword perceived, not being included, not being like others, not feeling, perception is the key, not feeling like they've got belonging, not feeling like they're acceptable. If they perceive they're not acceptable, then their brain isn't going to have the part online like growing and developing that helps them see themselves and others in a beautiful, joyful way. They're going to be in duress. They're not going to be happy. They're not going to have, the empathy that you're showing, that Nicholas shows in your story to Krampus.
Mm-hmm.
Where, Krampus is terrified to really be seen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he won't show himself. And Nicholas brings him out and shakes his hand. And actually, obviously, through the story, brings him with him, right? Even through the generations, come with me. So I think the only part of the old world that we don't see in the story, which makes sense that we don't, but you bring it in at the very end. So people are going to have to buy the book to see this the ending of this particular chapter, is where in the end we see Krampus be loved and come to life and be happy. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
We'll do a little spoiler alert for you there. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Krampus makes some friends.
Oh, it is just delightful, and it's so warm, and it's so sweet. And so we know that when people show us inclusion as the story unfolds, and as we don't feel that people hate, I hate people, he's saying, in the beginning, and, I hate people, and, they're cruel and they're mean. When people are cruel and mean to us, it actually changes our body. It actually changes our biology. But if we can always get back to someone who understands the cruelty that happened to us, let's say something cruel happens to me and I am horrified, and I know Gwen will get me because Gwen is so empathetic, and I call Gwen and I tell Gwen all about it. And just through the look on her face, even if it's through a Zoom call, even if it's just the look on her face or the tone of her voice, what my brain knows is that we're bringing a hurt into understanding in a place that isn't rehashing the story, but it's being felt. So that's the Center for Empathy, and the empathy, all the stories in the book talk about how being felt moves an experience from the part of the brain down here, fight, flight, or freeze. It literally is almost like it percolates chemicals. I'm going to check my time here. Okay. It's almost like it percolates chemicals so that the brain creates a new activity all the way up here. If people that are watching would touch the right side of their brain above their right eyebrow, empathy sends chemicals up here to create a whole new area to wrap around that trouble, bring it to a shared understanding. And every time now that I think about that shared understanding, here's the big key. I'm not alone. Gwen is with me, or whoever understood me is with me. And the brain loves to not be alone. And here's the key about identity. And you can just tell me if I'm putting too many pieces of the puzzle. The part about identity is if I'm Krampus and Nicholas understood me, and somebody else in the story understood me, which everybody will have to read to find out who that is. Instead of wanting to switch people, I want to just connect with people. They're my friends. So the bad things that happened are now understood. And my identity, this is literally the identity center. When people understand us, we get chemicals to grow at any age, even until we die, to grow that area of the brain that says we're valuable, viable, and unique and irreplaceable. And from that place, we are happy. Even if something bad's going on, the understanding makes us feel good. When we're understood, even during a bad circumstance, there's understanding. There's that sweet spot in a crisis where the understanding and the sharing says there's inclusion and belonging for any state of mind. And that changes the mind body. So the empathy that I see, your question that we had prepared was, how do we see emotional intelligence in Nicholas? And do we see it in Krampus? Well, we see it in Krampus at the end. We see a lack of emotional intelligence in Krampus in the beginning, because he's in a fight, flight, or freeze mode. He's fighting cruelty with cruelty. He receives love. And so I wonder what he would be in the generations to come if he kept receiving love and he didn't want to switch children anymore. And we know that if there are bad children, they're acting out pain. They are not bad.
So let's say there are children who are bad. They behave. I don't know the right word to say it. It's been a long time since I used to teach preschool and actually studied early childhood education. So I should know all this by now. But I'm kind of rusty. So I remember learning that you're supposed to ignore the unfavorable behavior and reward good behavior.
And so what that teaches a child is, I'm only acceptable if I can perform above my pain. And then children dissociate from their pain, suppress their pain, which means they're alone inside their skin with pain. And that goes into the unconscious mind. And that actually wreaks havoc in the immune system and in the body. So what we want to say if a child is acting up, and I mean, I deal with, teens who are cutting and suicidal and running away and all that kind of thing, or have been human trafficked, or like all kinds of stuff. So trauma can be really little. It can be really big. If I have a child that's just going up to some other child and they just keep knocking over their blocks, I know that child's probably needing some guidance, maybe some attention to something that they're acting out. Children can only act out stress responses, and they can learn how to be understood in order to show understanding. And so we're organizing their brain how to handle negatives and positives by understanding their negatives and their positives. So I don't know if that's confusing. Does that?
Well, it's just here it is, the whole Santa Claus thing of coals in your stocking and
based.
So what should we be doing instead?
There's of course nothing wrong with rewarding, a good performance, but we don't want children to feel like what they do is more important than who they are, right? Mm-hmm. So if they're doing something bad, it's really important to understand there's usually a need behind doing something bad. Maybe it's a need for sleep. Maybe it's a need to be heard. Maybe it's a need for control. And that's the kind of thing, that we tell stories about in the book, is we look at the worst behaviors and we go, oh, that child needed this and this and this. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not accountable for their behavior, but it means we can bring understanding to it. And at that point, their brain changes. And then they begin to have, we call it new maps, to behave according to the understanding. And often, even if they need a punishment, even if they need a consequence, when we feel understood, we take on that consequence with ownership because we're proud of the fact that we can make it right when we're understood. But if we're not understood and we're isolated and we're all alone, the brain doesn't like it, the nervous system doesn't like it, the tummy doesn't like it, we hate being alone. We're going to have a secret self. And different types of children are going to try to gain and work really hard to kind of get that acceptance back. So there's never a time a child's identity is not acceptable. Their behavior may need corrected, but they should feel that they as a person are always acceptable. So for Christmas, I would never use something like Christmas to be something that the good kids get more than the bad kids.
Okay. Well, Sharon, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This has been such a lovely conversation. And I just want people to know that if they want to learn more about you, what is your URL?
It is Sharon at SharonKuhn.com, Kuhn.
All right, Sharon, thank you so much. And you have a Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
Christmas. Happy holidays, Gwen.
Bye-bye. Okay, so our next guest is Dave Goggling with Guitar Angel. Hello there, Dave. How are you?
Not too bad, too bad. Things are going well for you, too.
It's going really well. Say, do you like apple strudel?
I don't think I've ever had it traditionally made, but I imagine it would be like most anything similar that I've had.
Okay. So I wanted to talk to you today. I'm obviously having trouble reading with these glasses on, so I'm not going to read. I know I told you I was going to read a part of my book, but instead, I just want to jump right into talking about music. So just to give people a background, music is really important to the Commodities. It's part of their spiritual rituals. It's part of their everyday lives. I even have a music shop. So music is really important. And with Zinfandel in particular, Zinfandel is not just a ghost, but she's also a vampire. And my vampires are different. They don't sparkle, and they're not the Twilight vampires. They're not the Anne Rice vampires. Their chi, the way I phrase it is their chi, which is your vital life force energy, radiates at the lower end of the multifarious spiritual energy spectrum. And chi is the vital life force energy. So vampires radiate at the low end of that frequency. And that's where we get our minor keys, our dark colors, any of the more the dark and dreary things, and we just kind of thrive, like rainy days. I love rainy days, and I love dark red wine and all that good stuff. So that's what the Rivervine vampires are all about, and the Commodities in particular are really big on music. So Dave, I wanted to bring you in to talk a little bit about music. First of all, just introduce yourself to people. Who are you, and what's a little bit about your background?
Well, I've been mainly playing guitar for the past 20 years or so. I've also been studying guitars and related gear, and in that time I've been performing live with a few different bands, and most recently another local hard rock metal outfit that I've actually also been writing and recording with, as well as most recently working on my own album and a few other missions included.
So your album is available for download on Reverb. Is it on Reverb Nation or SoundCloud, or?
I go through Bandcamp for that. SoundCloud is SoundCloud is kind of the wider community, and then Reverb Nation is connected to Facebook. So between those three sites, you can pretty much find just about everything I've done.
Cool. So tell me about music. So Zinfandel's really into minor keys. Why do minor keys always sound so dark and gloomy?
Well, it's not always dark and dreary. It's, there's a lot of things that it hinges on, like how forcefully a passage is being played, how loud it's being played. So it can represent from the mild melancholy all the way up to fully inflamed rage and all points between. But minor keys are generally used in that, but the odd and cool thing is that you can't do the opposite. You can't write music in using only major chords, because nothing is all happy, bright, and sunshine all the time. I mean, it's just like life, really.
So, like every culture throughout history has had some sort of music in their religious ceremonies. What is it about music that is so spiritual? I
don't think music itself is spiritual. I mean, it's kind of like the wind. It just is. But ways of composing it or of performing it that kind of rewires your mind. It sets, it gets you in the right frame of mind for whatever the setting is, and that's one reason why scoring is so important. For TV, movies, anything. It's music is the one piece that when you hear it, and other than smell, hearing is actually music. is one of the things that memories and a points in your mind of this is what I'm supposed to be doing, or this is what I felt at this time. Music is one of the most powerful triggers in our mind, and that's why you have all of these word I'm looking for. It's not austere, but full and present sounding pieces, so that when you hear it, your mind, your subconscious literally goes, oh, I need to be in this mood, and before you're following right into it without even realizing it.
So you wrote a piece for me, the Rivervine Overture, which I am going to use one of these days. I've got to get my YouTube channel up and going. So tell me about that piece.
That one, I actually took a lot of inspiration from many Celtic pieces that I've heard. One particular was actually remixed from a video game a bit, but that was one of the biggest parts that I used, because it had a similar structure to what I wanted to do, and it had kind of the same. So it's instead of having uppity jazz numbers or whatever, it has this almost orchestral quality about it, and that's one thing I wanted to capture in Rivervine Overture.
That's cool. It's a beautiful piece. I am really, really proud of it. So,
especially, sorry about it, but especially with the 12 acoustic with it, which people think acoustic guitar, think dreadnought shape, 6 steel strings, etc. But the 12 string is not heard very much, so it's uncommon, and gets that. What is that kind of quality?
What instruments did you use on that piece?
Well, a few of them right behind, actually, in the tree back here. How well you can see it, but it's 5 fretless bass, and then right over on the end here, that white my Schecter Avenger, which is set up more for again the hard rock's kind of is one of the things that's kind of my almost. Such a versatile instrument. I've set all ours that way, so it just had the tuning and the voice needed for that song.
That's great. So you called it a song, but there's no lyrics. Now I've heard that it's not a song if there's no lyrics. What do you say about that?
Eddie Van Halen said it best. Some people say a song without singing isn't a song. Tell that to Beethoven and he'll whoop you.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Gone but not forgotten, Eddie.
All right, Dave. Is there anything else you want people to know about you or your music?
Well, I'm still working on getting my YouTube channel up and running. Get some of my originals performed up there. Kind of my minuscule show here. But for the most part, I can be found at Ibsatong on Facebook, or search for Guitar Angel. That's how you can find me. That's also r-angel.bandcamp.com. That's the main for my whole album. A couple other goodies thrown in. .com/Angel Zinfandel. German, obviously, for 7 string. But those are the portals that you can get me for pretty much, for composition. I also do guitar tech work because I had to learn how with not being able to afford any of that work myself. So if it refers to you can talk to us about anything.
All right. Thank you so much, Dave. We'll talk to you later. You have a happy holidays.
Blessed you all.
Blessed you all. Bye-bye. Okay. So, and I am gonna post the links to everyone's websites in the comments down below after tonight's thing. So, our third subject for the evening is about agriculture. So, and I'm gonna actually try to read this. I had printed all this. I did all this stuff, all this preparation, and of course, it all goes to hell. Oh, so now we are. I'm sorry. I got things mixed up. Now we're going to move on to Mommy River Leather Goods. So a grimoire, the title of the book is Zinfandel's Grimoire. And a grimoire is a diary and well, it's not just a diary, but it can be used for all different sorts of things. The purpose that my character uses it is for so she's feeling, she can sense that there is this enemy approaching and she has this great battle that's coming on, and she is about to lose everything again. She's already lost everything once when there was the great fire that got rid of, they created the Blacklands back in 1848. So she feels like it's going to happen again. And before it happens, she has to document everything, and she wants to put everything down in a journal, all of her heartfelt emotions, all of her memories, all of her secrets, all of the traditions, the whole history of the Kamadi culture. She wants to document it, and so she writes this grimoire, and that's the whole basis of the book. Well, I happen to have some friends in Fort Wayne, Alan and Delilah, who are with Mommy River Leather Goods, and they make the most beautiful leather-bound journals. So I am going to bring them on. Are you guys ready?
I hope so. Let's
Hi,
see.
Alan. Hi, Delilah.
Hello.
Hello.
Got to kind of figure out camera angle here. Can you hear us okay?
I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
Okay, great. I can. Oh, it doesn't work. Hey, we can get in there, kinda.
You'd be in there more than I would.
Hey, well, no, you don't have to hold it, dang.
Well, I can't reach the thing.
Anyhow, thanks for having us.
Thank you for joining me. So you guys have the most beautiful leather journals, and I forgot to ask you to have some on hand to demonstrate. I don't know if you have any close by.
You know, we had intended to. Sorry, I just keep
Okay.
messing
That's
this
okay.
up. But we intended to have some on hand, but Jake was feeling really bad today, and he has the inventory. So instead of risking getting sick, we decided to just hang out.
Well, that's good. We can definitely hang out. And I've posted pictures before, and I can post pictures again. So tell me about, tell me a little bit about your company to start off. How long have you been in business, and why did you decide to start?
Sure. So Jake started Mommy River Leather. Jake also goes by Captain, and he's been doing this for a few years now. And he brought me in, it'll be 2 years in March. So, and he ended up getting Delilah here as a bonus. And I myself have been doing leather work for maybe not continuously, but I have had some kind of leather work experience for the last 17 years. Jake has had, similar, he's done leathercraft for a long time. He is our definite
Workhorse.
Our workhorse, the heart of the company. Jake does the majority of all of the artwork that you find on the journals. Really, he does a whole lot of construction, and we help where is needed. So, and like you said, we do like adventure-ready leather work. So we do all kinds of stuff.
What is adventure ready?
So essentially, it just means that we are making it with you really ruggedly using them in mind. So we are using a leather that's thick enough to handle some wear and tear. The manila sketch paper that we use in most of our journals is heavy duty. And it's really going to be able to go out hiking with you or camping or, whatever it is that you're getting into. You should just be able to strap your journal on you and head out into the wilderness.
They're also,
I don't know how well you can hear Delilah.
They're also kind of set up to be, to last through the ages. A lot of the journals and stuff, or even leather products that you get from a store that's not handcrafted, are made with thinner leathers or maybe even like fake leather.
Yeah, like bonded leather.
And these are, for lack of a better term, because we do a lot of medieval recreation, they're like the grade that armor would be almost for a
well, our journals are not quite
but they're thicker. They're
armor
thicker.
grade
They're
leather.
not bonded with some other material. So they're made like kind of like your character. It's gonna, if you tuck it away in a trunk or bury it under a floorboard or something, in a few years it's still gonna be there. It might be a little cracked, it might be a little dusty, but it's not gonna have deteriorated.
Yep.
What else do you make besides journals?
So we do all kinds of things. We'll do most custom orders, but we also make knife rolls, chessboards,
Actual leather armor.
Yeah, we have done armor. We'll make belts, wallets. So there's a lot of things that aren't our normal stock. Our normal stock definitely revolves around the journals and book covers and that sort of thing. But we've also done like wall hangers and bottle openers and just all kinds of different stuff.
We end up, because of the circles we travel around in, making a lot of things for medieval fairs and people.
Pouches.
So like pouches, bags, or because of the gaming community, we make like things to store your gaming dice and your figures.
Yep.
And we definitely have made leather jewelry. Jake has made leather bracelets and wrist cuffs.
Even mouse pads for gamers.
Mouse pads. Kind of, it's just your imagination is the limit. There'll be a few things that we just can't do because we don't have the equipment.
Especially with the pandemic kind of ruining our normal inventory. We've been having to stick a lot to the normal inventory since it's hard to do a custom where you have to buy a whole side of leather to do one product and then not be able to really keep using it right now. But
how have you been? How have you guys been? How has your business been surviving through this whole pandemic with all the shutdowns and stuff? You can't do the vendor fairs.
Right. It's been pretty rough, but we've had fairly consistent online presence, especially since we got our website going earlier this year. We were just on Etsy. Now we have our own website, so that's helped a lot to get an extra set of traffic.
And what is your website?
It's mommyriverleather.com, so really easy to remember there. And you can find essentially the same stuff both on our Etsy page if you search us there, as well as on the website.
And on Etsy, you would just search Mommy River Leather, and it would come up.
Yep. I think if you do it all one word on Etsy, it comes up immediately. But
and are you guys also at Faye's Cabinet?
We were for a little while, yeah. We don't have anything in there anymore. But oh my goodness, Jake is gonna kick me because I cannot remember the name of the store that we have stuff in.
We have it at the Graybull Country Store, and where the log cabin used to be. I'm sorry?
No, not at Catalbatry.
But it's on the same street.
And it's not. We used to be in the coffee cabin there, but I don't think they're still open anymore. But we are across the street from there.
Right.
Yeah.
And I love that we've been able to do this with you too, because as I was talking with you earlier, that Al and I have been talking, I know that a lot of the part of your story is that your character is trying to preserve her traditions and the craft of her family and stuff. And that's kind of the same thing that's going on with leatherwork. It's a very much, unfortunately, at least the type of leatherwork we do, it's a sought after art, but it's a dying art. You have a lot of people who want to buy it, but not a lot of people who want to learn how to do it. So we're preserving that tradition.
Yep.
Do you teach leatherwork?
So I haven't so much recently, but I did for a long time teach people how to do basic construction, how to do basic carving, the different dyeing techniques and things when I was associated with Tandy Leather. And it's definitely something that in the future we still want to be able to, share that knowledge with any new crafters, as well as, we've gone to
Girl Scout camps.
Yeah, like
4-H.
camps, scouts. We've done stuff with Allen County 4-H and went and taught them how to make journal covers and belts and some different things that they were interested in. So. And
Jake is doing a new broadcast or Facebook Live every now and then called Drinks with the Crafter. And if you've ever met Jake, he's really funny and
he's very charismatic.
Very charismatic.
He's a goofball.
He likes to sip a little whiskey or something and have a talk with people. And during that talk, not only does he talk about Mommy River as a business, but if he has people that want to learn, they can ask crafting questions like, what should I use? What material? What tool? Whatever. And he'll do that. And Alan will probably participate that some, but it's really kind of Jake's baby because he is just so hilarious online. And I really wish he had been with us tonight, but he was just not feeling well. You have so many different kinds of leather that leathercraft itself can vary, from using what we use, which is primarily vegetable tanned leather, the same thing that you'll see with traditional belts, knife sheaths, gun holsters, that sort of thing, versus the more finished leathers that you're using for upholstery or purses or boots.
So you've got just a million different items that come out of the leathercraft industry. And we're coming up with stuff like every day. Jake, he started with journals, and through us, we've expanded to doing the armor. I have made bookmarks. Jake has made these wooden boxes in conjunction with his brother where the box is wood, but the inlay is leather. And he does some amazing like Celtic and Norse knotwork on top of those. Mm-hmm. And we've just add stuff all the time. I mean, he made leather bow ties one time just because he wanted to. So. Lots of stuff. And all of those are in different leather mediums. Like the leather bow ties are more of a soft, pliable, so that he could actually bend it into the shape. Like a more utility leather. Yep.
So Delilah, tell me a little bit about your role in the company.
So I am the unofficial secretary.
She's the secretary to the secretary.
I'm the secretary to the secretary. So it's really Alan and Jake's company, but I do a lot of like behind the scenes, like
she does a lot of PR. She helps me find venues that we can go vend at.
Yeah, I'd say more of the PR and making sure that he knows where all his receipts are and his.
She goes and keeps me company and helps me set up at our booth.
So I work with them, but it's not solely. I'm not an owner or whatever, but Alan and I are kind of a package deal because we're married.
And so she helps me do the crafting and construction. And when Jake will give us a batch of journals, she does a lot of sewing with me, and because we do everything hand sewn.
Yeah, nothing is done on a machine. So, and I love it because it's very relaxing. I can put the journals on a table beside me and prop myself up in the bed and turn on a good movie and just stitch away, and it's very relaxing. It's almost cathartic. So, but I'm just here to kind of back Alan up and whatever Jake needs from me. So I do everything from running stuff to the mailbox to ship, to putting some stuff together, to maybe going and picking up a beer for Jake. Just depends on what they need.
So, Alan, where did you learn the craft?
So I originally got into leathercraft because I was a dork and was part of, and still part of, a medieval boffer game, which essentially means that we beat the snot out of each other with foam sticks. And so for that, I wanted to make armor. And so my first trip into Tandy Leather was completely in the dark. I walked in and said, you know, don't have any idea where to start, but I want to make armor. And they got me the basic stuff I needed, and I went home and made probably the most miserable looking armor you could imagine. And then
got better.
And then, yeah, with practice got better. And I continued with it since, making all kinds of stuff. Like we said, belts, wallets, journals,
And
cuffs.
I was just going to throw that we have a kind of unique process in some of our things too. A lot of stuff when you see leather out in the mainstream, it is carved or stamped. And particularly stamped is like someone's already drawn the image. You're just getting the leather prepped and stamping it into it.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the cool things that Jake does, and I do, I'm not quite as good as Jake yet, but not only does he carve, but he does something called leather pyrography, which is where you're basically taking a hot tool and you are branding or burning the image permanently into the leather. So
much like a wood burner.
And the benefit to that is you can do that almost like a pencil or pen. So you can get tons of detail that sometimes people can't get with the carving.
Yeah.
And so that gives a lot of things. And he
so
does a lot
our
of
journals our artwork tends to be a mixture of
like a mixed media.
Carving, where when you think about carving, you're actually changing the depth of the leather to raise portions and to set portions down, and giving it that depth. Whereas with the burner tool, you're really going in like it's a pencil, and you're really applying all those lines and that artwork and the all the little details.
Yeah, and the same thing too, even with Jake and all of our painting technique. A lot of what you see when you see the colors on some of our journals, it's not paint. It's where we've actually taken thin brushes and actually painted dyes into the crevice and stuff. And that's in itself interesting to do because of the way the leather absorbs things.
And it also means that it's not going to like flake and wear off like paint does over time. The dyes actually change the pigment of the leather. So it's a permanent change.
All right. Well, you guys, thank you so much for joining me tonight. It's been wonderful talking with you, and you guys have a happy holiday.
Thank you. You too. Thanks for having us
Happy
again.
Yule.
Yeah, blessed you all. Okay, so now we're going to get on to agriculture, and I'm going to look at my cheat sheets for that. So I'm going to read a little passage. I think I have enough light to do that. And then we're going to bring on Stephanie Henry. So just a moment, Stephanie, let me get this part done. So reading Lily's aura, I sensed that she was preoccupied with pressure from the local land peddler, Edie Clark, to sell the farm. Okay, so I should back up a little bit. So Lily Rhodes owns the herb farm next to Fermata Cellars. And so what I'm reading right now is Zinfandel talking about Lily and the pressure that she's having from this local developer. And so Zinfandel, she lived back in she died in 1848. So she doesn't know what a developer is. So she just calls it a land peddler. So she goes on to say, Miss Clark has been around Rivervine for decades. In fact, she is the one who originally sold the black land to the Divinorums in 1969. In recent years, Edie has approached Sevilla and Sage numerous times about selling the property back to her so she can develop it for housing, shopping, and industrial purposes. The Divinorums have always refused. So have all the other commodities with land she wants to seize. In the meantime, the land peddler buys property surrounding commodity territory, hoping the pressure will inspire our farmers and homesteaders to sell their land. The battle is all due to the increased demand for homes that offer an escape from city life, but still sit below the treacherous snow line of the Sierra Nevada mountains. Farmers want to keep the area because the soil is fertile and lies on a gentle slope, providing good drainage for the roots of their crops. The grapevines particularly appreciate the high ash content of the dirt. Ranchers find the expansive grassy fields ideal for livestock to graze. Non-farming families who live in Rivervine need employment, homes, medical care, shopping, recreation, and entertainment opportunities without having to drive their horseless carriages into New Helvetia or Yerba Buena. There is also a large number of people advocating for the nature spirits. These activists do not want the area developed at all. They would rather preserve the land to allow the wild animals to roam freely and the trees to grow majestically. So, I am bringing on Stephanie Henry. Hi, Stephanie. So, Stephanie.
My
Hi,
Bluetooth
Stephanie.
wouldn't work, so I'm wired, and I keep forgetting how to function with wired headphones.
I know, it's a pain. So tell me a little bit about what you do as the Fort Wayne Advocate.
Well, to start with, thank you for having me, Gwen. I'm really honored that you asked. I'm thrilled that I have such incredibly talented friends who are doing really cool things. And in your honor, a toast. I don't normally drink wine, much less red wine, but I couldn't not for you. So
Sláinte. I appreciate your sacrifice.
anything for friends. So I'm Stephanie Henry. I'm the Fort Wayne Advocate is what I've been calling myself. I work in food and farm policy, and I'm an advocate for our communities, for our families, and for our land. And that's a very complicated answer that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. But when you talk about food systems, when you talk about food systems, I set myself an alarm. When you talk about food systems, it involves so many things because it's the land and the water. It's also property owner rights. And then you've got so many socioeconomic things and then policy, not to mention all of the vagaries of agriculture. And I got into this because I grew up food insecure. And when I was going to college, working on my business plan for my farm to fork restaurant, I ran into the challenge of not being able to find farmers to supply me here in Indiana, America's heartland. And that just seemed really odd. And I took a break from school, mostly because it was the recession and I didn't have a choice. It was either that or homelessness. And that's the thing that's facing a lot of farmers and a lot of people who aren't farmers. So we're all kind of in this together. But it's kind of like this silent epidemic. And it's really interesting, especially living here in Indiana. I know you've come to us from California, where it's a different kind of agricultural, environment. There's a lot of corporate agriculture, but there's also a lot of family farms and stuff scattered. It's a different kind of environment. Here in Indiana, in the heart of the Midwest, the story of agriculture isn't quite as how people have been led to believe, or even how I was led to believe growing up here. Because I grew up and I always wanted to feed people, and I always wanted to have a farm to fork restaurant, which my teacher, Mrs. Benjamin from Oslo, who has, I think, since changed her mind, told me that nobody wanted farm to fork restaurants. And growing up here and wanting to feed people and being surrounded by farms, I just always assumed it was, learning how to cook and understanding how to eat nutritional things and how to make it fit your time. that was the big challenge. And so I had focused myself on doing a farm to fork restaurant where, we could engage more with people and help to educate them about why they wanted to make those better choices, not just that they wanted to make it. And so finding that there really wasn't the supply was a big game changer for me. And then digging into the history of how we got here, you start to run into, situations like what you're describing in your book. Although here in America, historically, it was mostly the African-American and other migrant farmers who, whose land was, acquired and under threat. But even today, our farmers here are facing incredible land acquisitions and farm consolidations. And just being aware of that and being involved and a part of that conversation is a big part of what I do. And talking with the farmers and the people out in the rural areas and connecting them with the people who live in the cities or other areas who really care about what they're doing, but don't have the way to engage with them.
Okay. I'm thinking of all my other questions that I had for you. What are some of the issues facing local agriculture today that you haven't already mentioned?
Well, COVID really cast a big magnifying glass on a lot of the issues that our local farmers have been facing for a long time. It just really magnified it because it took away a lot of those larger mainstream corporate supply line options. And, what that means, especially here for us in Indiana, is that while we're in the top 10, I'm not going to give a specific number because it's probably changed, but we're in the top 10 of agriculture production in the country, but we import over 95% of what we consume, the food that we actually eat. And a big majority of what we produce is corn, pork, and soybeans. But the things that we do produce that are edible, a large percentage of that we export, or we have to export out of the state just to process it. An example is that meat processors. We have very few small or mid-sized meat processors in the state that are USDA certified to process things. So the majority of things are consolidated in large corporate pork and beef and chicken slaughterhouses. And so when the pandemic hit and those confined large scale slaughterhouses were seeing lots of exposure and contraction of COVID and had to take precautions, either slow down or shut down, farmers had nowhere to send stuff, and producers and consumers, both had few or no other options. I have quite a few friends who still live in the country and who raise animals and whatnot. And in trying to get an animal for myself butchered, it would have been months waiting. So it makes it really challenging for our local producers to be able to scale up, to have the resources to compete with land developers, or what did you call them?
Land peddlers.
Yes, land peddlers. I like that.
Yeah, because she would know what a developer was. So when I lived in California, and this whole thing started. The concept for the book came. I was working for the Elk Grove Citizen. I was lifestyles editor, and at the time, Elk Grove was still an agricultural town. It had one stop sign, and by the time I left, and I only worked there for 14 months, and by the time I left, there had just been all these different. It was ridiculous. There was so much development that went on in that 14 months. And the whole agricultural thing, that's what inspired me to write, to start the book, was this whole thing with Elk Grove, what was going on in Elk Grove. And the farmers, they don't have the money to fight. And then you get people on the city council that, you know, all they see is dollar signs, which is important. And I'm not saying that that money's not important. We definitely want to have adequate tax dollars in our city coffers, but the struggles that at what cost exactly.
I have an interesting story on that. I actually drove 4.5 hours down to New Washington earlier, just a few months ago, in order to have a conversation with Senator Todd Young at a corn and soybeans meeting. And I went because I was not getting any response from his staff except for form letters. And I really needed to talk to him about why we are not seeing any support or engagement from our senators or any of our federal delegation when it comes to some of the bills, especially like CFAP and other things that would go to small, not only businesses, but also farms and farm families. And so I went down to New Washington because I heard that he was going to be down there because I get all of the notifications. And so I showed up to talk to him, and wouldn't you be surprised? The other corn and soybeans farmers weren't really thrilled with Senator Young either, because it turns out that over the last decade or so, a lot of American companies have gone out of business that ran grain elevators along the river. And those elevators have gotten shut down and then left to kind of fall apart. Well, it turns out that now there are corporations that are, to my understanding, and I've not researched this thoroughly, so it's my understanding that these corporations are owned by other countries like Brazil and China, who are now coming in with the backing and the resources of entire countries, buying these now abandoned grain elevators, fixing them up and putting them back into service. Well, Senator Young's response is, well, that's good. It's more business and dollars, except those dollars.
But are we worried about China?
I mean, I guess apparently they don't see a difference between the worries about China and China businesses buying American assets like grain elevators and land. Even there's been a huge consolidation of properties and land buyouts that, I mean, honestly, can keep somebody occupied for a good long time trying to trace back the different organizations and corporations and different names that things are under. But you can see the damage as you drive through our state and our communities, where towns are a shadow of themselves, are gone entirely. And I see it on my news feeds, on my Twitter feeds, on my Facebook feeds, friends and associates that I have in agricultural communities across the country, are struggling from a suicide epidemic because the median age, there's less than 0.5% of the American population that's currently engaged in growing food that we consume. And of that 0.5%, the median age, I think just past 60, it was 58. Now, it was 58 to 62. Now I think it's 60 to 65 or something. And almost all of them have no successor, no succession plan, and are well underwater when it comes to their mortgages, loans, inputs. And then when you add in, or when you factor in the impacts from the last couple of years, the year that a year or two ago when we had all the very, very wet spring, some farms quite literally had already bought one crop to go in. And then when they weren't able to get that in by the deadline, they bought another crop to try and meet the next deadline. And when that didn't happen, they bought yet a third crop of seeds and inputs. And some of them didn't get any of it in the ground. And those who didn't get the kind of yields that they were anticipating. And it's just, the whole thing is just it's been so corrupted and so diverted from anything that's really functional after this pursuit of business, whatever. I'm one of those individuals that's kind of a throwback. Food is for eating, and agriculture, while there's a business component to it, I don't understand the value of trying to make a dollar if you can't put food on your table. Because, our communities, even the agricultural communities, aren't producing enough to support themselves, much less support all of us living in the cities who think that we can just take a ride out to the country and load up the boot of the car with, some eggs and chicken and a side of beef and, be good to go. It doesn't work like that.
All right. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for joining me tonight. It's been wonderful talking to you. And you
So good
have
to see you.
a happy holiday.
You as well.
Bye. All right. So now we move on to talking about Jewelry and the Ogham. And joining us here tonight is John Drum, who I know as Drum, my Ogham teacher. And he is the Archdruid for, and I'm going to butcher this, Ardratfine.
Arnriach.
Okay, I told you I'd butcher it. Okay, so John, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I just want to read a little piece about, I guess I didn't. Okay, never mind. I'm not going to read anything. So tell us, first of all, so I just want to let people know that I made up a religion, but it's very heavily based on ADF Jewelry. And I love ADF Jewelry. I think it's a fabulous organization and a fabulous belief system. And I love it a lot. And I like how we have the Ogham alphabet, which I'm going to have Drum talk about in a little bit. And I like how the spirituality is seen in the, it is animistic, and there is a lot of it's an earth-centered spiritual practice, but I like how divinity is seen as the ancestors, nature spirits, and shining ones. So, John, start off by telling me a little bit. Well, can't talk. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a druid. I've been a druid for a long time. I started really following pagan paths when, after reading Edith Hamilton's mythology in 8th grade. And I thought, wow, this is pretty interesting. And I thought that the gods were still alive. There was a course, a test I had, and they said it was a true-false question. It said the Greek gods are still worshipped today, and I said true, because it surely made sense to me. And gave her back, and it said false, and well, that started all this stuff. I read a book called Drawing Down the Moon in the early 1980s, and it talked about Reformed Druids in North America. So I wrote to the resource in the book and said, hey, I'd like to know about the new Reformed Druids in North America. And they said, hey, we're starting this new group called Arnriach. And so I joined Arnriach. I was one of the first members to join. And so it's been kind of an evolving practice for me. I really like the way we do things. It's a devotional based practice where we build relationships between ourselves and, as you mentioned, the ancestors, the nature spirits, and the shining ones.
So ancestors and nature spirits are kind of obvious. You can get that by context, but who are the shining ones?
The shining ones are the gods and the goddesses. So really the ancestors are ancestors of our family, or ancestors of our heart or hearth, and ancestors of the place. The nature spirits are those spirits of nature around us, seen and unseen. And the shining ones are the gods, basically, to kind of make it gender neutral in a way. The ancestors are those who we can get guidance from, and the nature spirits are those who teach us about the cycles in our lives, and the gods are really the ones that can work some magic, and that can work with the laws of physics and make them different. So when we need something done that kind of defies the laws of physics, we look to the gods. Help me with this, help me with that.
Okay. So Zinfandel uses the word awen an awful lot. It is kind of like the word aloha or shalom. Use it as a greeting, you use it to say goodbye, use it to mean all kinds of things. And then the symbol itself, it's three sticks with dots above them. So tell me about the symbol and about the word.
Well, the symbol is used, I think, more broadly in Obad or other Druidic traditions. And to me, the symbol really is. I've always seen it as the three rays of the midsummer sun. Uh, just it's the rays of the sunshine that are kind of emanating from a particular source. For Awen is inspiration, or this what I would call the spirits of inspiration. In ADF practice, we there's part of our ritual we call to the spirits of inspiration, and I think that inspiration is what drives our creative process. And so the reason we call to it in our rituals is, we usually say things like, honey our words, or silver our tongue, basically so that we can express ourselves better, and that we can, so that we can speak better and think better. And it's the inspiration that arises in us that helps create things. And I think that in many Druidic traditions, ADF and Obad and others, it's this Awen, this creativity that is a driving force in the work that we do.
What is the Ogham?
The Ogham. Okay, well, just some brief history on the Ogham. The Ogham is a glyphic system or writing system that developed in the early in the Common Era, probably between the years 300 to 600, and it's kind of a stark representation of, I call them tree trunks and branches. There's typically there's a trunk, which is the center line, and then there are lines that cross it, typically. So horizontal lines, diagonal lines, lines to the right, lines to the left. And these lines were originally alphabetic characters, first described in the Book of Ballymote, which is a 14th century document. And it talked about different ogham systems. And the way that it's described there is they were ways of learning the alphabet. So there was a tree ogham and a color ogham and an animal ogham, so that I would say different letters were the beginning of words in Gaelic, for example, and those words people would learn the alphabet by learning these letters. So the common system that's used in Ogham is called Belush Nan, which is or Belush Farn, which is the first three letters B, L, and then F. And so B in the tree Ogham, B would be Bay is the birch tree, and Lush is the rowan tree, and Farn is the alder tree. So people would identify different things with these different characters. And what we find historically is that in Southern Ireland and in the Western British Isles, there are ogham that are found on stones, basically on the edge of stones. Many of them are basically commemorative, saying remembering a person or something that happened in a particular place. It may have been the case that there were ogham written on wood, but they just don't exist anymore. We do see in the lore some descriptions in the Wooing of Attain, for example. We see a description of some ogham cut into a stave that was left, and that ogham had a significance, but we really don't know what those ogham what they meant at the time in a magical sense, or how they were really used. Using them as a divination tool, which is what we do now, is kind of a more modern pursuit or modern technique. I use it as a divination system. I picked it up from Colin and Liz Murray. They had a book called The Celtic Tree Oracle in the late 1980s, and that's where I learned it. So, a little bit of information.
How accurate is it?
Well, that's an interesting question. What I used to do when I used to do readings for people, I typically will do timeline readings that are good for about 6 months, and so I would write it down and give it to the person, and then if I'd see them again, I would do another reading, and we would kind of compare the timelines to see how things have progressed. As with any divinatory system, it's really a suggestion of what's going to happen, not the absolute, it must happen this way. So, I mean, I think that it's fairly insightful. I know people who draw oghams draw an ogham every day. You can either do that as kind of insight into what your day is going to be or a reflection on what your day has been. And I think it's fairly interesting. There was a grove in ADF that wrote down their omens for all their rituals. And at the end of they were around for about 6 years. And at the end of that time, if you really look through the ogham readings, you can kind of see the progression of the grove as it began, the optimism, and then as things were kind of winding down. So how accurate is it? Probably, 50-50. I'm going to say, just to be on the safe side. But I think that there's a lot of applications there, and I think it can work very well for.
So what is the value of any divination system, but especially ogham?
Well, I think that any divination system, I like to consider it as like plugging into the cosmic switchboard. Basically, what we're doing is we're using what's called sortilege, kind of the random draw of characters to gain some insights. So to the scientist, the scientist would say, well, you've just picked 7 tiles randomly, and there's really no relationship to anything. But I think that a person who believes in divination or believes, has magical connections with these tools, they would say, well, these things give me some insight. They help me understand, what's going on right now in my world, what's just happened, what's happening at this time, and what's going to happen in the future. So I think it's an insightful tool for self-reflection.
Okay. Final question. What are the requirements if someone wants to join ADF, what are the requirements?
The requirements are it's $30 a year, fundamentally. What I would, for people who are thinking about joining ADF, for $30 a year, you get a lot of coursework. It's self-directed coursework, but you, as long as you're a member, you can do whatever courses you want to do and turn them in. Someone will review them, and I guarantee you will learn a lot of stuff. We do have some guidelines, if you look on our website, that tells you what we believe and what our attitudes are. And, I'd welcome anyone to take a look at ADF.
All right. Thank you so much. And you have a blessed Yule. Well, do we celebrate Yule?
I do, absolutely. I celebrate the winter solstice, but Yule it is.
The winter solstice. Okay. All right. Well, you have a happy solstice.
And you too, thank you so much for having me, and blessings to you.
Thank you. But we're back. My huge apologies to Stephanie Connolly Reisner. I thought she was 1 hour behind me. She's 2 hours behind me. So fortunately, she was kind enough to jump on early and join us. So Steph, welcome.
Hello.
Hello, Stephanie.
How
So
you doing?
the reason I brought Stephanie in to talk to us is because I don't read tarot, and I don't really know that much about it. I just thought it would be really neat to name all of my chapters after tarot cards. So what I did was I went through each chapter, and whatever happened in that chapter, I tried to find a tarot card that related to it. So, but I don't really read tarot. So I brought you in because you're one of my tarot buddy friends, and you're also a published author. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do as far as being an author and your tarot reading hustle.
So basically, I write books about witchcraft and demonology, and I have been reading tarot cards since I was 16 years old. So that's something else I kind of do on the side professionally. So I do the writing with the fiction and the nonfiction, and then of course I have my divination business because I do other things too. I mean, I read runes and I read Lenormand cards. I don't know if you know what those are.
Mm-hmm.
And just stuff like that. So yeah, it's interesting.
What makes it interesting to you?
I think what it is like, okay, so like each card has a meaning, but you get to a point where you kind of go beyond that, where you actually look at the pictures in the card and what those cards kind of evoke within you, and you read them like a sentence, like the cards before and after and all around the card that you've got there. It basically tells a story, and you can kind of get some intuitive insight from the pictures, because you can take a card from the same card from like 5 different decks, and that imagery is going to evoke something different in you. So like you can know what it means, like traditionally what that card means, but it may change slightly depending on the deck too.
Yeah. For my Krampus chapter, I named the 7 of Swords, and I'm trying to remember why I did that. But I'm looking at the image now, and it's still trying to get used to these
Right.
this thing. So 7 of Swords, Krampus, and I'm thinking because he sneaks in, and
Well, the interesting thing about the 7 of Swords is like traditionally it's like a card of you can look at it as being resourceful, because he's picking up all those swords. He's kind of resourceful, being able to carry all of that. And then of course you have like the truth revealed, a revelation of something of some kind. It can also be is signified by the 7 of Swords. You have to remember the swords are like the air element, so they have to do with thought and thinking and our mental processes. So, but depending on the 7 of Swords and where it's at, it could also indicate maybe like something's wrong, or there's like a situation isn't that good, or that someone's going to betray you too. Maybe they might take some of your opportunities. So, I mean, it really, again, depends like what kind of cards are all around that 7 of Swords. If you were just to pull the 7 of Swords by itself, I would say that just means resourcefulness or a truth is revealed, some sort of revelation of some sort.
Yeah. So the chapter preceding the 7 of Swords is the Ace of Pentacles, and it's followed by the 7 of Cups. Does that mean anything to you?
So the Ace of Pentacles is always like a new opportunities card, or it's a card of stability. So that is, I mean, if you were to read those cards, you said the 7 of Swords was, the Ace of Pentacles was before the 7 of Swords?
Yeah, it went Ace of Pentacles, 7 of Swords, and then 7 of Cups.
7 of Cups. Okay, and the 7 of Cups is like kind of that's a card of, well, you could say wishful thinking or illusions, but it's also another card of opportunity. So you have like resourcefulness, stability, and new opportunity. So, I mean, those are different ways you could kind of look at it. The sevens in the tarot, they're impactful on spiritual relationships. So that's kind of an interesting take on that. If you kind of looked at the sevens, that's if you have like 2 sevens, but sevens themselves are like indicative of like creativity and individuality. So, which is kind of that's one of those things like where you learn, because you can also read like regular playing cards. So like tarot is basically, it goes hand in hand with regular playing cards. And I actually knew a woman from Poland who read tarot cards. And she was the grandmother of a friend of mine, and she taught my friend how to read regular playing cards. And then my friend in turn kind of turned around and taught me, and it was really interesting. So I don't know if I actually remember how to do that, but
I bought these in Placerville just on a whim. There's this shop in Placerville, California that has, I called it the goth shop. It's called the Black Rose.
Right.
And I actually got the Ace of Spades tattooed on my left calf. But they're just regular playing cards.
Oh, nice. Oh, those would be really good for divination.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
So those are it's just kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, like diamonds corresponded with earth. I could be wrong about this. And I don't remember if hearts were water or fire. I'd actually have to look that up. It's been so many years since I've tried to read regular playing cards. So I don't think I've played with that since I was in my early 20s. But yeah, I mean, but I think the same thing goes, like when you're talking about like the meanings of numbers and all of that. I think that kind of goes through into the playing card bits too. So
I read somewhere recently that playing cards were designed to teach children or people the different seasons. There's like different agricultural things. Like there's 4 seasons, and then
there's 4 elements associated with the 4 seasons. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. I've never heard that before.
Yeah. So I want to talk about your writing career. You write under 4 different pen names. I just finished reading Dark Prince, which is your line under the Audrey Prince. Audrey Bryce. I'm telling you, I have chemo brain fog. It's horrible. Anyhow, Audrey Bryce, which is my favorite line that you write. So tell me a little bit about what's going on in the world of Darker Wood Publishing. That's your imprint?
Yeah. Yes, Darker Wood Publishing Group. So right now, I mean, I use 4 different pen names because it's not because my readers don't know that I'm all 4 pen names, but I do it because it makes it so much. I have such a huge catalog of work that I've been putting out over the years that it made it easier for my readers to find exactly what they were looking for. So for like my S. Conley stuff, that's my nonfiction. That's my witchcraft and demonology stuff. And I've also done other nonfiction, like articles, writing articles and stuff under that particular pen name. And then S.J. Reisner is my PG-13 stuff. And it's fantasy and romance and just, I don't know, general fiction, but it's all PG-13. That's the thing. And then the Audrey Bryce stuff is all, I like to say that's my pen name where occult fact meets occult fiction. Because I write a little bit in everything there. I write some paranormal romance, some urban fantasy, some dark fantasy, cozy mysteries. I love, and just regular mysteries. So thriller type stuff, horror, all of that is under Audrey Bryce, but it's more the rated R stuff. And then I have my rated X pen name, where I actually write like the really super steamy romance with that. Some of it is actually erotica, but not all of it is. So it's kind of like that's just the really intense graphic stuff. But I separate it just because I still do like the paranormal romance and everything. And that too, it's just that it's just more graphic. And I found that my readers, they're like, oh, I like your work, but that's a little too graphic for me. Or, oh, I really just want horror or stuff like that. So it makes it easier for them to find exactly what they want.
That's cool. I just finished reading Dark Prince, and I really did enjoy it. But I got to tell you, I kept thinking and of course, I've been watching, you can tell I watch way too much news, because I kept expecting Shelby Mithras. I see what you did there with that name. I kept expecting her because she's from Kentucky, and her love interest is the Prince of Hell.
Right.
Oh, that's what I wanted to ask you. So in your book, you refer to hell as a different sphere. So is that like a different planet, or is it like a different realm?
It's more like a different maybe dimension or plane of existence. So I like to think of it as an interdimensional thing. But it also, that kind of like a mythology kind of allows for, you know, like maybe you've got Asgard for a particular, or you've got heaven, and that's like a particular sphere. And the different sphere is like the level it vibrates at. So it's kind of an interdimensional thing.
Okay. Because I kept thinking of sphere as like a ball, like a planet.
Right.
But what I was saying with the news is I thought Shelby was going to like take over hell and turn it into this great constitutional republic. And I'm like, okay, Gwen, because I joke that I write political science fiction because that's what Zinfandel's Grimoire is all about. It's all about politics. And I'm like, okay, Shelby is not going to be taken. She's not going to start a revolution, and hell is not going to become a constitutional republic. They're not going to get a constitution. They're not going to hold elections. Can you imagine having political parties in hell?
Oh, wow. Oh my, that would be interesting to say the least. I was thinking more like a Hallmark movie, but in hell. It's kind of what
it is definitely a Hallmark movie. Yeah.
Like when I was editing it and I was like reading it back, I like actually set it down for just a second after I had finished it, and I'd finished marking it up, and I was like, that was like quirky and weird, but strangely satisfying. I'm not sure what the heck I just wrote. I'm not sure what that is exactly. So, but people's like reaction to it has been good.
I know, you're just gonna have to start your own Hallmark 2.
Right.
Hallmark 2, the dark side of the card. The dark cards.
Oh my goodness. I have not read your book yet. I'm excited to read it. It's on my queue. So
it's on your Kindle?
Book after the one I'm working on now.
All right. Well, I greatly appreciate all your support, and I greatly enjoy reading your work, and I always enjoy talking to you. So thanks so much for joining us tonight, Stephanie.
Oh, thank you.